The most beautiful garden you've ever seen is actually a massive financial threat to the billion-dollar nursery industry. Think about that for a second. Every time you walk into a big box garden center, you're walking into a carefully curated trap designed to keep you coming back every single spring. Wallet open, ready to replace the disposable plants that kicked the bucket over the winter. After 15 years of running a commercial greenhouse and consulting for some of the biggest suppliers in the country, I've seen the balance sheets. I know exactly why those flashy, neon bright annuals are at eye level right by the entrance, and why the real immortals, the plants that thrive on neglect and live for decades, are tucked away in the back or left off the inventory list entirely. It's not a conspiracy theory. It's just bad business to sell you a plant that works too well. If I sell you a finicky rose bush that needs 3 different fertilizers and a prayer to survive the July heat, I've got a customer for life. But if I sell you a set it and forget it powerhouse that multiplies on its own, well, I've just lost a customer, because you'll never need to buy another plant from me again. You've probably felt that sting of black thumb guilt after a $100 haul from the nursery turns into a pile of brown sticks by August. I'm here to tell you right now, it isn't you. You don't have a black thumb. You've just been buying plants that are biologically programmed to fail in your specific climate, while the hardy survivors are being hidden in plain sight. Here's the secret the industry doesn't want you to realize. The most successful gardens aren't built on effort. They're built on cheating. And by cheating, I mean using plants that are so aggressive, so resilient, and so easy to propagate that nurseries actually consider them a liability to their profit margins. I'm talking about legacy plants. These are the species that your great-grandmother had in her garden that are likely still blooming today, even if the house has been abandoned for 20 years. But if you look for them at a franchise garden center today, you'll likely find a sterilized, patented version that's been bred to be less hardy, or you won't find them at all. Now, you might be asking yourself, why would they intentionally sell me something weaker? It's the same reason your smartphone starts slowing down after 2 years. It's called planned obsolescence. And yes, it exists in the world of horticulture too. But it gets worse. Not only are they hiding the easy stuff, they've rebranded some of the best plants on earth as weeds or invasive simply because they grow too fast for a nursery to control their inventory. They want you to buy a tray of 16 begonias every year rather than planting one single perennial that will turn into 16 plants by next season for free. I know this sounds crazy, but stick with me. Once you learn how to spot these blacklisted beauties, your gardening budget is going to drop to almost zero, and your yard is going to look better than the local botanical garden. Before we pull back the curtain on the specific plants that make nursery owners sweat, do me a favor. If you're tired of spending your hard-earned retirement money on plants that just won't stay alive, hit that subscribe button. We're building a community of smart seniors who are done playing the industry's games, and I want you in the loop. Let's start with the first category of plants they'd rather you didn't know about: the self-multipliers. These are the plants that essentially function like a high-interest savings account for your yard. You buy one, and within 2 seasons, you have enough to split, share with the neighbors, and fill every empty corner of your property. Take a look at the back row perennials that nurseries hate because they're essentially one-and-done purchases. I'm talking about species that have survived ice storms, droughts, and total abandonment without breaking a sweat. But here's the kicker. Even when a nursery does stock these, they often hide them behind the prestige plants. You have to know what you're looking for, or you'll walk right past a 30-year investment to buy a 2-week decoration. The industry doesn't want you to know this, but they have a Goldilocks zone for the plants they choose to stock. They want something that looks incredible in a plastic pot for 3 weeks. But once you get it home and the nursery steroids wear off, it starts a slow, agonizing decline. If a plant is too hardy, it's a threat to their business model. I've seen buyers at major retail chains turn down perfectly healthy, native perennials because they were too vigorous. Translation: if we sell this to a homeowner, they'll never need to buy a ground cover from us again. Let's talk about the first blacklisted beauty, the real hosta. Now, you'll see hostas at every garden center in America. But look closer. They are almost always the fancy, variegated, patented hybrids with names like blue mouse ears or stained glass. They're beautiful, sure, but they're delicate. They burn in the sun and turn into a buffet for slugs overnight. The hidden version? The old-school hosta lancifolia or the giant sum and substance. These things are absolute tanks. You can literally chop a clump in half with a rusty shovel, throw both halves into a hole in the dead of summer, and they will thrive. In 3 years, that one $10 plant can be divided into 20. Nurseries hate them because they are too easy to propagate. Why would you buy a flat of ground cover when you can just split your one immortal hosta every spring? But it gets even sneakier when we look at daylilies. Walk into a nursery and you'll see the Stella d'Oro, that cute, short, yellow lily. It's the industry standard because it's predictable. But the old-fashioned orange daylily? You'll almost never find it for sale. Why? Because it's so successful it's often labeled a weed. It grows in ditches. It grows in sand. It grows in clay so hard you'd need a jackhammer to dent it. If you plant these, you have a permanent, flowering privacy screen that requires zero maintenance. The nursery would much rather sell you a high-maintenance Asiatic lily that needs staking, special bulbs, and precise pH levels just to survive the week. Now, you might be asking, how do they actually hide these? They use a tactic I call the ugly duckling phase. Many of the toughest, most rewarding plants, like sedum autumn joy or native coneflowers, look like absolute garbage in a nursery pot in April. They look like a pot of dirt with a few sad, green nubs. The nursery pushes them to the back, behind the bloom-forced annuals that were grown in a climate-controlled greenhouse to look perfect today. You, the unsuspecting gardener, see the bright pink petunias and grab them. You ignore the ugly pot in the back. But that petunia is a disposable plant. It's going to die the second the first frost hits. That ugly sedum? It's a sleeper hit. It'll grow 3 feet wide, survive a drought that kills your lawn, and bloom every single autumn until the year 2100. I've spent years watching people fall for the bloom trap. If a plant is blooming in the store in early spring, it's likely been stressed or forced. It's a sugar-high plant. The real powerhouse plants, the ones that are too easy to grow, are often sitting there without a single flower on them, looking boring. But here is the secret pro tip that makes the nursery managers nervous. Look for the plants in the clearance or rescue rack that aren't actually dying. They're just out of season. Plants like peonies or bleeding hearts have a very short shelf life for retailers. Once the flowers drop, the average shopper thinks the plant is dead. The nursery marks them down 75% just to get rid of them. But as a seasoned gardener, you know that the root system is what matters. You're buying a lifetime of blooms for the price of a cup of coffee. I know this sounds like a lot of detective work, but stick with me, because it gets even more profitable for you. We're about to get into the propagator's forbidden list. Plants so easy to grow that if you own one, you essentially own a plant factory. These are the ones nurseries keep under lock and key or try to convince you are too aggressive for a suburban yard. Before we move on, where I'll show you the cloning secrets that will turn your backyard into a free nursery, hit that like button if you've ever felt tricked by a flashy store display. It helps the algorithm show this to other gardeners who are tired of being taken for a ride. Are you ready for the big hitters? The plants that actually expand your garden while you sleep? Look, I'm going to give it to you straight. If you really want to beat the system and have a yard that looks like $1 million on a Social Security budget, you have to stop thinking like a consumer and start thinking like a propagator. This is the part where the nursery managers start getting really nervous. You see, Their entire business model relies on you being a one-time user. You buy the plant, you plant the plant, and if you're lucky, it stays exactly that size until it eventually peters out. But what if I told you that some of the most stunning plants on the planet are basically botanical glitter? Once you have a tiny bit of them, they are everywhere, and they're nearly impossible to get rid of. These are the self-sowing giants. Take black-eyed Susans or purple coneflowers. If you go to a fancy garden center, they'll try to sell you the designer varieties, the ones that are neon orange or double-petaled. Here's the catch. Those designer versions are often sterile. They won't drop seeds, and they won't come back true to color next year. The nursery hides the original, wild-type versions because those things are seed-dropping machines. You plant 3 of them this year, and by next year, you have 30. By year 3, you're giving them away to everyone on your block. To a nursery, that's a lost sale. To you, that's a free landscape. Then there's the hydrangea. Every senior I know loves a good hydrangea, but at 40 or 50 bucks a pop for a decent-sized shrub, filling a backyard can cost a small fortune. The industry keeps the softwood cutting secret under lock and key. You don't need a degree in botany or a high-tech lab to clone these beauties. You just need a pair of scissors, a little bit of dirt, and a plastic cup. Take a 6-inch clipping of a non-flowering branch in early summer. Dip it in a little honey or rooting hormone, and stick it in moist soil. In 6 weeks, you've just printed yourself a $40 plant for free. If everyone knew how easy it was to copy-paste hydrangeas, forsythia, or even rose bushes, those giant garden centers would turn into ghost towns overnight. But here is the absolute biggest secret they're keeping from you: native plants. Now, I'm not talking about weeds. I'm talking about plants that have evolved over thousands of years to thrive in your specific soil and your specific weather. They don't need the expensive blue bag fertilizer. They don't need the $30 a bottle pesticide. They don't need you to stand out there with a hose for 3 hours in August. Nurseries hate selling true natives because they don't require the support system of chemicals that make up 40% of a garden center's profit. They'd much rather sell you a finicky Japanese maple that needs a specialized diet than a serviceberry or a native oak that just grows. If you really want to find the hidden gems, stop looking at the plants and start looking at the labels. The industry wants you to buy those patented hybrid annuals, but you should actually look for heritage perennials. Why? Because hybrids die, but heritage plants last a lifetime. They want you to buy sterile cultivars, but you should look for open-pollinated varieties that give you free babies every year. And never buy something just because it's potted in bloom. Look for dormant rootstock. Bloom-force plants are stressed out, but the roots are where the real life is. Now, if you really want to stick it to the big box stores, look for local seed swaps or garden club sales. That's where the real immortals live. You'll find the plants that have survived in your neighbors' yards for 40 years without a single drop of store-bought Miracle-Gro. You've got the knowledge now. You know how to spot the traps, how to find the ugly survivors, and how to multiply your garden without spending another dime. The black thumb myth is officially busted. But there's one more thing. Knowing which plants to buy is only half the battle. You also need to know the 3 specific dates every year when nurseries practically beg you to take their best stock for pennies on the dollar. I've put together a nursery cheat sheet that lists the top 10 immortal plants by U.S. climate zone. Would you like me to generate that list for you so you know exactly what to look for on your next trip?